The UK's proposed Cybersecurity and Resilience Bill is officially moving cyber risk out of the IT department and straight into the boardroom. Relying on annual vendor questionnaires is no longer enough. Under this framework, your organization faces a strict 24-hour incident reporting clock and material penalties for governance failures. This regulation shifts businesses from paper confidence to hard operational evidence. Today, we're unpacking how this impacts your managed services, critical suppliers, and overall operational design. By the end of this video, you will have the 6 practical, no-regret moves your leadership team needs to execute this quarter to build true operating discipline. Let's get right into it. Here's the conversation between Fee and I. Welcome back. Today we're talking about the UK's proposed Cybersecurity and Resilience Bill. And I'll start with the headline. This is not a niche cyber regulation. It is a boardroom resilience issue.
Exactly. This is one of those moments where leaders hear cyber bill and immediately file it under IT, legal, maybe compliance. But that misses the point. This is about whether organizations can keep essential services running when systems, suppliers, or infrastructure fail under pressure.
Right. The real question is not, do we have a cyber policy? It is, can the organization keep its promises under attack?
That's the line. Because customers do not experience your policy. They experience whether the service works, whether communication is clear, and whether leadership looks prepared or surprised.
And under this proposed framework, speed matters. 24 hours is not a communications preference. It is an operating requirement.
24 hours is not a preference. It is a test.
Let's set the context. The UK already has cyber rules for essential services and certain digital services. But the threat environment has changed. Organizations have become more dependent on outsourced technology, cloud infrastructure, managed service providers, data centers, remote support, security vendors, and complex supply chains.
And attackers noticed.
They did. That is the uncomfortable part. Attackers are not only trying to break into one organization at a time, they are looking for the access point that gives them reach. A managed service provider can hold privileged access into many customers. A data center can sit underneath multiple sectors. A small supplier can quietly support a business-critical process.
So the risk has moved, and the regulation is trying to catch up.
Exactly. The proposed bill expands the perimeter around the organizations that can create systemic disruption. It does not pull in every business. This is not a universal cyber licensing scheme, but it does bring more attention to the organizations sitting behind essential services.
So who should be paying attention?
4 groups especially. First, medium and large managed service providers. Second, data centers that meet the relevant thresholds. Third, large load controllers, because electricity demand is increasingly digital and connected. And fourth, critical suppliers to regulated services.
That fourth one is the boardroom wake-up call.
It is. The critical supplier concept matters because a supplier may be brought directly into the regulatory frame if its systems or services are important enough to the continuity of a regulated service. In plain English, if your failure could seriously disrupt something important, you may not be able to hide behind the phrase, "We're just a vendor."
That changes the power dynamic. Historically, supplier cyber risk has often been handled through questionnaires, contract clauses, audit rights, and a lot of hopeful language.
Hope is not a control.
Exactly. We sent the vendor a spreadsheet is not resilience. It may be evidence that someone asked a question, but it does not prove the supplier can withstand an incident, communicate quickly, or recover inside the window the business actually needs.
And that is the core move here. The bill pushes organizations from paper confidence toward operational evidence.
Let's talk reporting, because this is where leaders can get caught out.
The proposed regime introduces faster and broader incident reporting. Organizations may need to provide an early notification within 24 hours, followed by a fuller report within 72 hours. The relevant regulator and national cyber authorities are brought into the loop. And in certain cases, customers may also need to be informed when they are likely to be affected.
And that sounds simple until you imagine the actual incident.
Exactly. At hour 6, the facts are incomplete. At hour 12, the technical team may still be working out whether access was successful, what systems were touched, and whether data or operations are at risk. At hour 18, legal, security, communications, operations, and leadership may all be trying to answer different versions of the same question. Do we notify?
And the wrong answer is, let's wait until we're completely sure.
Usually, yes. Complete certainty often arrives too late. The new model is about early visibility when there is a meaningful cyber risk, not just after the lights go out.
So the practical takeaway is that incident response is no longer just about containment. It is about decision speed.
Decision speed, evidence, and accountability. Who decides? What information do they need? Which service is affected? Which regulator applies? Which customer communications are required? Who signs off? How do you preserve evidence while still moving quickly?
And how do you do it at 2 in the morning when the person who knows the system architecture is hiking in Wales with no signal?
That is not a hypothetical for many companies.
No, it is painfully real.
Then there is enforcement. The proposed penalty levels are serious. For the most serious breaches, penalties can reach the greater of £17 million or 4% of worldwide turnover. For less serious breaches, the ceiling can be the greater of £10 million or 2% of worldwide turnover.
That changes the conversation. Cyber resilience is no longer priced like a technical nuisance. It is priced like a material governance failure.
Correct. And beyond penalties, regulators may recover supervisory and enforcement costs. So the financial impact is not limited to technology remediation. It can include regulatory engagement, legal support, assurance, customer communications, contract work, and long-term control improvement.
Which means finance has to be in the room. Procurement has to be in the room. Legal has to be in the room. Operations has to be in the room. This cannot sit with the CISO alone.
No, the CISO may run the security function, but the business owns the operational promise.
That is such an important distinction. Security manages controls. The business owns consequences.
Exactly.
There is also the NIS2 angle. A lot of companies with EU operations are already building NIS2 programs. Can they just use that and call it done for the UK?
Not safely. The UK approach and NIS2 overlap in important ways. Broader scope, supply chain focus, resilience, faster reporting, and stronger accountability. But they are not identical. NIS2 is broader by sector and has explicit management body obligations. The UK model is more targeted and criticality-driven, with particular attention to managed services, data centers, critical suppliers, and national security direction powers.
So the smart approach is harmonize controls, localize obligations.
Exactly. One control framework where possible. Separate reporting maps, legal thresholds, regulators, timelines, and escalation triggers where required.
That sounds administrative until an incident happens. Then it is the difference between coordinated response and executive panic.
That's the truth. The law is forcing companies to answer questions they should already know. Which services matter most? Which suppliers can take them down? Who decides when to notify? And whether the board can get a reliable view before customers, regulators, or the media are already ahead of them.
Let's make this practical. I'm a board member, risk leader, general counsel, CFO, or operational executive. What should I do first?
First, scope the business properly. Do not just ask, "Are we regulated today?" Ask 4 questions. Are we clearly in scope? Are we likely to become in scope? Do we supply organizations that are in scope? And do we depend on suppliers that may be in scope or critical to our own resilience?
That second layer matters, because even if the law does not directly apply to you today, your customers may still push obligations down through contracts.
Exactly. Regulation often travels through the supply chain before the regulator ever calls. Customers may require faster incident notification, stronger audit rights, resilience evidence, subcontractor controls, recovery testing, and proof of security governance.
And commercially, that can become a differentiator. A supplier that can clearly explain its resilience posture is easier to trust.
Yes. Second, map critical services and dependencies. This is where a lot of organizations get uncomfortable. They may have asset lists, they may have vendor lists, but they often do not have a clean map showing which systems and suppliers support which important services.
And without that map, 24-hour reporting becomes theater.
Correct. You cannot make a fast regulatory decision if you do not know what the system does, who owns it, which service it supports, what customers it affects, and what suppliers sit underneath it.
So the board should not be asking for a 1,000-line asset register.
No. The board should ask for a resilience map. Show me our most important services. Show me the systems behind them. Show me the suppliers behind those systems. Show me where we have concentration risk. Show me where recovery is untested. Show me which risks are accepted and which are just neglected.
That last distinction is brutal and necessary. Accepted risk has ownership. Neglected risk has excuses.
Exactly. Third, build a notification decision engine. I don't mean more bureaucracy. I mean a practical matrix that tells the organization what to do when an incident occurs.
What should be in it?
Triggers, timelines, recipients, owners, approval paths, required content, evidence requirements, and cross-border overlays. For example, when do we notify the UK regulator? When do we notify national cyber authorities? When do we notify customers? When do data protection rules apply? When do contractual notice obligations apply? When does insurance need to be informed? And who has authority to press send?
Because in an incident, everyone has an opinion. The organization needs a decision route.
Exactly. And that route needs to be rehearsed. A tabletop exercise is useful, but it has to feel real. In a real incident, facts are messy, executives disagree, suppliers are slow to respond, and communications teams are worried about saying too much or too little.
The exercise should make people sweat a little.
A little, yes. Better to sweat in rehearsal than freeze in production.
Very Matt.
I'll take that too.
Fourth area, suppliers. What needs to change?
Supplier risk needs to become more operational and less ceremonial. Annual questionnaires are not enough for critical dependencies. Contracts should address incident notification timelines, cooperation with regulatory reporting, audit and assurance rights, access controls, vulnerability management, subcontractors, business continuity, evidence preservation, exit support, and customer notification support.
And those clauses need to be usable.
Yes, a contract saying the supplier will notify you within 24 hours is worthless if their internal help desk takes 26 hours to escalate a serious security event. Legal promises have to become workflows.
That is the phrase. Legal promises have to become workflows.
And supplier lists need to be ranked by operational criticality, not just spend. A small specialist provider can be a load-bearing wall. If it fails, everything above it moves.
I've seen that. Tiny invoice, huge dependency.
All the time. And leaders need to ask about fourth parties too. If your critical supplier relies on another cloud provider, remote management tool, software component, or outsourced service, you may not control it directly, but you need to understand the concentration risk.
That is where procurement, legal, cyber, and operations have to work as one team. Otherwise, everyone sees a different slice of the same risk.
Exactly. Fifth, upgrade board reporting. Boards do not need a flood of technical metrics. They need evidence of resilience.
So not just blocked malware emails.
No. Useful metrics include the percentage of critical services with current dependency maps, critical suppliers with updated assurance, time to detect and escalate incidents, ability to prepare a 24-hour notification pack, unresolved high-risk vulnerabilities affecting important services, privileged access coverage, recovery test results, incident exercise findings, and overdue remediation with named owners.
That is a very different dashboard. It tells the board whether the organization can respond, not just whether the security team is busy.
Exactly. Activity is not resilience.
Let's talk about accountability. The UK model may not copy NIS2's management body language exactly. Does that reduce board pressure?
No. Boards still oversee material risk. Cyber is a material risk because it can affect operations, revenue, customers, legal obligations, reputation, and sometimes public safety. Even where the statute does not name directors in the same way as NIS2, the governance expectation is clear. Boards need to understand, challenge, fund, and monitor resilience.
And board minutes should show that, not in a performative way, but in a real way.
Yes, the minutes should reflect challenge, decisions, accountability, and follow-up. Not just the board noted the cyber update. That sentence has done a lot of heavy lifting over the years.
Too much heavy lifting.
Much too much.
What about frameworks? Where should organizations anchor the work?
The cyber assessment framework is a sensible anchor for many organizations because it focuses on resilience outcomes, managing security risk, protecting against attacks, detecting cyber events, and minimizing the impact of incidents. It is not just a checklist. It asks whether the organization can demonstrate that important functions are protected and recoverable.
And zero trust?
Useful, but only if treated as a design principle, not a product label. Zero trust means verify continuously, limit access, assume breach, and reduce blast radius. In this context, that helps with supplier access, privileged accounts, lateral movement, detection, and recovery.
So, do not buy a slogan, build the architecture.
Exactly. Compliance is evidence. Resilience is reality. You need both.
That one goes on the clip reel. Let's bring this into the next quarter. What are the no-regret moves?
First, brief the board on the proposed regime using the company's own facts, not a generic legal update. Answer: are we in scope? Could we become in scope? Do we supply regulated entities? And which critical services depend on providers that could affect our resilience?
Second, build the dependency map.
Yes. critical services, systems, suppliers, fourth-party concentration, recovery assumptions, and ownership.
Third, test the 24-hour clock.
Exactly. Can you identify the incident, assess business impact, convene decision-makers, decide whether to notify, prepare the first report, align customer communications, and preserve evidence inside the window?
Fourth, fix supplier governance.
Make it operational, contracts, assurance, incident cooperation, continuity, access controls, and exit planning.
Fifth, give the board better metrics.
Fewer vanity numbers, more resilience evidence.
And sixth, create a culture where bad news travels fast.
That may be the most important one. A blame culture delays escalation. Delayed escalation becomes delayed reporting, and delayed reporting can become a regulatory, operational, and reputational failure.
People need to feel safe saying something is wrong before they can prove exactly how wrong it is.
Yes, mature organizations do not punish early warning. They use it.
That is such a leadership issue. You can have the best incident plan in the world, but if the first analyst is afraid to raise the alarm, the plan is decoration.
Exactly. Cyber resilience is not just technical. It is legal, operational, financial, cultural, and strategic.
So the leadership mindset is, do not wait for perfect clarity. The bill is still moving, and secondary legislation will matter, but the direction is obvious.
More entities in scope, earlier reporting, stronger enforcement, more scrutiny of suppliers, more expectation that boards treat cyber as business resilience.
And that is enough to act.
So, where does this leave business leaders? The proposed Cybersecurity and Resilience Bill is a signal that cyber risk is being regulated around real-world dependency. Not just sectors, not just policies, not just whether a company has a security team. The focus is shifting to operational impact.
And that is the right lens, because modern business runs through systems, suppliers, data flows, cloud platforms, remote access, outsourced support, and infrastructure most customers never see until it breaks.
The boardroom question is no longer, can IT handle cyber? It is, can the organization keep its promises under attack?
And if the honest answer is, we're not sure, that is not a scandal, but it is a call to action.
Exactly. Map the dependencies, clarify ownership, test the reporting clock, strengthen supplier controls, fund the gaps, and make sure the board sees evidence, not comfort language.
Comfort language, I like that. Because a lot of cyber reporting is designed to make people feel better. This moment calls for something different, clarity.
Clarity before pressure.
And preparation before the clock starts.
That is the heart of it. When an incident happens, confidence is not a mood. It is the result of decisions made months earlier.
Professionally alarming, but also encouraging, because leaders can do something with that.
They can. Done well, this is not just compliance. It is better operating discipline.
And better operating discipline is never wasted.
Exactly.
That's where we'll leave it. Cyber resilience is moving into the boardroom, and the organizations that treat it as a business discipline will be the ones that look calm when everyone else is improvising.
Preparation beats improvisation.
Very Matt, and very true. What a great punchline to leave it for today. Thanks for listening, everyone. We'll see you next time in the control room.